From 1978 through 1982, the Columbia High School Eagles had a great run of talent, coaches, and success. Columbia started playing football in 1966, and in the years from 66 through 77, the school had only put together 4 winning seasons. But in 1978, Columbia hired a gentleman by the name of George Pugh, a name that will ring a bell with many of you watchers out there. Now, Pugh was a Montgomery native, guy who played at the University of Alabama under, of course, legendary head coach Bear Bryant. He inherited a team that had won just a total of 4 games in the 2 previous years, back-to-back 2-8 seasons. The immediate impact in 1978 of having a coach of his stature was a 6-4 regular season and a loss in the region semifinals. An incredibly successful year that really galvanized the fan base, the student body, and of course the surrounding area there in Decatur. The very next year, Pugh stepped away, and his assistant coach Ray Bonner took the helm as the head man on the gridiron and continued to build upon that success and the new foundation that was set by Coach Pugh. That season, 1979, they were led by All-State wide receiver John Houston. The Eagles finished with a 6-4 record, narrowly missing out on the postseason. Aided by a drop in classification from 4A to 3A, the 1980 year was a revelation. It featured 3 standout players who led the Eagles to the second round of the state tournament. Antonio Render was a defensive back at 6'3", 195, and was rated the preseason #1 prospect in the entire state of Georgia. Antonio would go on to garner the prestigious Parade All-American Award and play in Athens under Vince Dooley. Rory Graves was a 6'6", 280-pound offensive tackle who was rated the #22 overall prospect in the state of Georgia. He went on to Ohio State, and in 1985 was all Big Ten. Rory would play 5 years in the National Football League for the Raiders and the Vikings. That team also featured quarterback Darrell Weems, who was very shifty, very athletic, threw for 1,700 yards that year and also ran for a plethora of yards. He was named the DeKalb County Touchdown Club's Offensive Player of the Year. Coach Bonner, however, called his 1981 team, the next team, the greatest group of kids, let me make sure I get this right exactly and get the quote right, the best bunch he had ever been around, quote unquote. And statistically, it is most likely, at least to that point, the greatest Columbia team in that program's history. One of only 2 times the Eagles have ever won double-digit ball games to this day. One of only 2 times in Columbia's history since 1966 they've won double-digit ball games. They finished the regular season that year at 8-2. And along the way throughout the state tournament, they defeated Roswell in the region final and Gainesville in the state semifinals. Remember, I keep bringing up the region finals because in those days, the state tournament was much smaller. You had to win a region semifinal and then a region final to actually get into the state tournament. A lot of people forget that. Some of our younger viewers out there may not know that. State tournament didn't start until the round of 16. So, or round of 8. Well, they've gone through both incarnations, but the point is, in those days, in the early 80s, you had to win a region semifinal and then a region final to qualify for the state tournament. I digress. Sometimes you get lost in the history. My point is, that 12-3 year, as they beat Roswell in the region final and then Gainesville in the state semifinals, Gainesville a state power even back then, they then went on to the state title game and lost to one of the great all-time programs in Waycross. But that 12-3 year was led by 4 all-state players. Quarterback Mike Smith, wide receivers Al Phillips and Tony Slayton, and an emerging young superstar in Henry Harris, who Brad reminds us was 6'2", 240 at the linebacker position with a 4.6 40-yard dash. That team also included another junior budding star and a guy named Fred Lane, a speedster with 4.5 speed. By the fall of 1982, a moniker began to emerge for Columbia High School, the moniker of UCD, the University of Columbia at Decatur. Of course, this was kind of a joke on their own incredible talent, the talent that was starting to emerge from the program. Year in and year out now, they were starting to very quickly turn out major Division I talent. And it wasn't just on the gridiron, it was now becoming, it was in a myriad of sports, most notably on the track and field side of things, where a lot of the football players were also track and field stars, winning numerous gold medals in numerous sports, and that very season finishing third in the AAA state championship meet. The 82 team lost a lot of talent from the previous year, but like 1981, well, they simply reloaded. At the same time that all of this athletic success was going on, the football team did not let them down in 1982. In that 82 season, back now in the 4A classification, the Eagles finished that season at 8-3. Unfortunately, it ended in disappointment as they lost to Lakeside in the opening round of the playoffs, a team they beat in the first week of the regular season. By the end of that year, the TCA had also honored two more athletes in Fred Lane and Henry Harris, both of whom would go on to sign with the University of Georgia. Harris would be named the USA Today Defensive Player of the Year. Also on that team that year, by the way, as if I've not named enough stars, was Ron Sadler. Brad points out he was 6'5", 250, a defensive tackle who would go on to sign at Texas A&M, where coincidentally former Columbia coach George Pugh was an assistant. So it all kind of comes back full circle, doesn't it? Sadler would go on to play in the National Football League for 4 years, by the way, and is currently an assistant coach at Tucker High School. But then as quickly as it began, well, it all kind of fell apart over the next couple of years. In fact, they would post yet again back-to-back 2 and 8 seasons. It was kind of funny, the symmetry that surrounded this team. Coach Bonner went on to the college ranks and then would return to Decatur a few years later to lead the Cedar Grove Saints. Bonner was honored for his lifetime in coaching and mentoring in 2013 alongside legendary Southwest head coach Buck Godfrey in an emotional ceremony which featured many of the young men that we've mentioned in the Ever Wonder portion of the program today. His impact even reached an Olympic gold medalist in Georgia native Gwen Torrance. These Columbia teams, Brad says, from 1978 through 1982, the athletes that played there, and I'm quoting now, and the coaches who coached them deserve their place in the conversation of the all-timers in Metro Atlanta high school football history. Coming up next, in the What's Next portion of our program, it's the 2015 baseball preview from the TCA.